everyone. Welcome to Vineyard Church Southwest. We have a very special guest speaker today. His name is Mike Miller, and just give a little bit of background about Mike. You can clap if you like. A little bit, for those who don't know Mike or his background, Mike has a degree in Bible, so he should know what he's talking about, right? And he's been a youth minister, he's been a music minister, and he's been a senior pastor in his life, and now he's helping us with our band, and he's a mucho fine musician, as you all know. Mucho fine is Spanish for very good, you know. And so we've already welcomed him. Let's welcome him again, that Mike's going to speak the word to us today. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys very much giving me the opportunity to speak this morning. Today, we're going to be talking about what James has to say about how worship is the cure for a toxic tongue. And I just wanted to start out with some statistics that you may have already known. Some have already been quoted here. But the average American has around 30 conversations a day. 30. You will spend 1/5 of your life talking. That's scary, isn't it? In 1 year, your conversations will fill 66 80-page books. You didn't think you could write a book, did you? Men speak 20,000 words a day, and of course women speak 6 million words a day. Really, it's only 30,000, but I just took the opportunity to have my artistic license. So it's really important what we say, isn't it? There's this guy that was asked, do you resent that your wife has the last word? And his reply was, I'm just glad she got to the last word. This girl had her jaw x-rayed, and it turned out to be a motion picture. Prone to say the wrong thing. The bag boy at Kroger was asked by a lady, can I buy a half a head of lettuce? And not knowing that she was walking behind him, he went over to the boss and said, you wouldn't believe it, this old bag wants to buy a half a head of lettuce, And then he turned around and saw her there and said, and this fine lady wants to buy the other half. So it's very important. In James, and we found this out from Bob's messages, that he talks about the tongue. James does. Jim talks about the tongue in every chapter in the book of James. He talks about it more than anyone else, it seems like. And let's look at the Bible here in James chapter 3, and we're looking at through verses 1 through 12. And we're going to start with verse 2. And verse 2 says, we all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. Now, I want you to circle that word perfect, because that's kind of a scary word, isn't it? Well, perfect here, I'm glad to tell you, doesn't mean flawless. What it really means is mature and healthy. So what James is saying is that if you are able to control your tongue, that means you are mature and healthy, able to keep your whole body in check, your whole body. When you are sick, and you went to the doctor, what's the first thing he asked you to do? Stick out your tongue. Open your mouth, stick out your tongue. Your tongue reveals what goes on inside of you. And so this morning, we're going to understand, first of all, why is it so important to watch what we say? Why is that so important? And secondly, we're going to learn to embrace worship as a cure for a toxic tongue. I could have named this message, Don't Let Your Tongue Lick You. So, let's talk about this. Why must I watch what I say? And there are 3 reasons that James gives us, and he gives us these 3 reasons in 6 illustrations. And the first reason is, your first blank, my tongue directs where I go. My tongue directs where I go. And James chapter 3, verse 3 gives the first illustration of a horse and a bit. You can see the horse there. I looked around for a bit and I couldn't find one. I wasn't quite bold enough to ask Cracker Barrel for a bit off their wall. But let's look at that verse. It says, when we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Now stop for a moment and think about a horse. An average horse will be about 900 pounds, 800, 900 pounds. An older horse, one of those big horses that used to go to war in the older days, they used to breed them 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. But they would control them with a little piece of metal. And my dad even told me there's a couple of different types of bits that you could use. Well, let's look at the 800, 900 pound horse that a jockey rides. How big do you think that jockey is? 95 pounds, maybe 100 pounds at the most? This little girl's able to control a 900 pound horse with a little tiny piece of metal about that big. So we shape our words, and then our words shape us. Where are you headed in life this morning? Your words control the direction of your life. Words and phrases are small, like that little bit. But yet they influence everything in our lives. It turns every part of our life, and it changes the direction of our lives. It directs where I go. There's a second illustration, and that's an illustration of a ship. In James chapter 3, verse 4, says, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever they go. Now this picture up here that you see is the picture of the Queen Mary. The Queen Mary is a very large ship, and this is the original Queen Mary. It's got the three, I don't know what you call those things on there, those three towers on there. The Queen Mary 2 doesn't have the towers. But do you know how much recreational space is on the Queen Mary? 3 acres. 3 solid acres. Now, if you live in a home, maybe in a subdivision, you might have maybe 1/4 of an acre that you live on to maybe 1/3 of an acre, or maybe even 1/2 an acre. And that's pretty big, isn't it? Or maybe you live on a 3-acre property. If you do, you probably understand this very well. That's a lot of space floating on water. 3 acres of land. Queen Mary's anchor is about the weight of 10 cars. It's a huge ship, but the rudder is very small. And that little rudder in the back of the ship turns the whole ship. And that's what James is talking about. He probably was even thinking smaller than that because ships weren't that big back then. So I want you to take your pen again if you can, if you'd like to, and circle the word steered. Circle that word steered. Because your tongue is the steering wheel of your life. It's the steering wheel of your life. It's the guidance. It's the GPS of your life. If you don't like the way you're headed right now, you might consider changing the way you talk. And you know, not necessarily just what you say, but how you say it. Because you can say things in different tones of voices that can really change somebody else's life and can really change your life. There's a guy that joined the Trappist monastery, and for 3 years he was not allowed to say anything. He was on probation. So he wasn't allowed to talk all year. And so at the end of the year, he was allowed to say 2 words at the end of each year. And so this guy went through the first year, and when his first opportunity to speak, to say 2 words came, he said, bed hard. And so another year goes by, and he's unable, he's not allowed to say anything, and so he finally gets to speak a second time in the second year. This would be torture for pastors, wouldn't it? He got to say his 2 words, and he said, "Food cold." And then the 3rd year goes, and at the end of the 3rd year, he had enough, and he said, "I quit." And the head priest said, "Well, that doesn't surprise me. All you've done since you got here is complain anyway." So your tongue directs where you go. Second, your tongue not only can direct where you go, but it destroys what you have. It can destroy what you have. And James gives 2 more illustrations. Verse 5 is up here, and it says, "Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark." And it goes on to say, "The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body." Actually, that's verse 3, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. First part of 6. Let me give you an illustration from life. And this happened in 1983 in Australia. One fire overnight destroyed 600 miles of land, village, and livestock. And you know what started it?